Hello and welcome to Rise Unwind. My name is Dan. You know, each and every week I try to talk to people from across the country about things we could do right here in your neighborhood. And on this week's show, we got this.
The 70s, just with fashion and music and cars.
Just live a life that you want to live.
All of that and more right here on Rise and Unwind. So what happens when your heart keeps you from doing what you love? That's what John faced with a condition called oHCM, a chronic and progressive heart disease that sidelined his passion for pickleball. But with the right diagnosis and treatment, he's back in the game. So joining us today are John and Dr. Payal Kohli, a Harvard-trained cardiologist, to talk about oHCM and how the treatment can make a big difference. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having us.
All right, can you walk us through what oHCM actually is and how it affects someone's kind of daily life?
So obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, Dan, is a genetic condition that changes the structure of the heart. So the heart is a pump that pumps blood to our body all day long. And when you have oHCM, the heart becomes stiffer, so it doesn't fill normally with blood. So instead of being a water balloon, it's like a lead balloon. And then the hallway that the blood uses to leave the heart becomes actually narrowed because of thickness of the heart muscle. And so the blood's not getting out as it needs to. So you can imagine when you exercise, you need more blood to get up faster to your organs. You start to have symptoms and blood's not getting to the brain. You feel lightheaded, dizzy, or you feel like you're going to faint. It's not getting to the heart and lungs. You feel short of breath. You feel chest pressure. You can also have palpitations. So it can cause a variety of symptoms, affect people's day-to-day lives, in fact, such that they can't even walk to the mailbox or take care of their dog or go up a flight of stairs. And it's a condition that we thankfully do have a lot of treatments for. So certainly surgery is an option to kind of cut out the thickness of the hallway, but we really reserve that option if people failed medications. We give medications like beta blockers that allow more time for the blood to get out. So that's one way to relieve that obstruction. But we also have FDA-approved medications like Camzyos or mavacamten that actually decrease the force with which the heart squeezes. So the heart's not kind of closing in on itself, not collapsing, and that hallway's not closing in. It has more time to allow the blood to get out. And so by giving patients these medications, it's important to make sure that you're not making the heart too weak, because if you're decreasing the force of contraction, then you want to make sure that the heart is not getting too weak and you're not developing heart failure. So we do check these patients serially over time with echocardiograms, which are ultrasounds of the heart. But this condition is called the Great Masquerader because so many people can actually miss it, both patients and doctors alike. And so that's why John and I are here to raise awareness about the disease. And we're working with Bristol Myers Squibb to also raise awareness about the treatments as well.
And for you, John, what were some of your first symptoms and when did you realize something that wasn't really right?
Right. So, I mean, exercise, Dan, has always been a big part of my life. I was a college tennis player, and my oHCM symptoms really became evident when I was in my 50s. I began getting dizzy during workouts, and I also started to get faint if I exerted myself. So it became difficult for me to go on, like Dr. Kohli said, a simple walk without having to stop and catch my breath. These symptoms continue to interfere with one of the things that I valued most, and that's my ability to stay active. And so about 3 years ago, I went to see another cardiologist, and I was diagnosed with oHCM. My doctor prescribed Camzyos to treat my symptomatic oHCM. And within a few months, it made a real difference in my symptoms. So today, my symptoms like shortness of breath and feeling faint are much better. And I'm competing in amateur pickleball tournaments now that I thought I would never be able to participate in again. And of course, others may experience different results. But if you're experiencing symptoms like this, if your listeners are, I really encourage them to talk to their doctor, because proper diagnosis and Camzyos, it certainly made a difference in my symptomatic oHCM.
And Dr. Kohli, what are some of the treatment options available for people with oHCM?
So, as we talked about, surgery, certainly an option. Those medications like beta blockers or calcium channel blockers, and then Camzyos or mavacamten. But these are mainly to treat the symptoms of obstructive HCM. There are also clinical trials ongoing to see if we can treat the consequences of the disease, because if the blood's not moving forward, it's moving backwards. And so we're looking at heart failure medicines like SGLT2 inhibitors to help protect the heart from developing heart failure, as well as treating some of the electrical complications. Because when you're putting stress on the heart muscle, the electrical cables that run through the walls of that muscle can start to get stretched out. You could be at risk for electrical problems like arrhythmias, even life-threatening arrhythmias causing sudden cardiac death where the heart just suddenly stops. So for those patients, we think about defibrillators as a treatment option as well. Just in case the heart stops, there's an insurance policy, a defibrillator there to sort of shock it back into rhythm.
And where can people go for more information if they do get help or if they're noticing some of these symptoms?
You know, if you're noticing the symptoms, don't blow them off. Don't attribute it to old age or being out of shape, and don't certainly dial back your exercise. Go talk to your doctor so that you can figure out what's going on, whether it's oHCM or something else. But also check out Camzyos.com because it has a ton of information about the disease, about its treatment, as well as some of the symptoms that can manifest.
All right, thank you, too, for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
What does it take to stare down a 1-ton bull and hold your ground 8 seconds at a time? In Not Her First Rodeo, we follow the real lives of elite lady bull riders, women who are rewriting the rules of rodeo and risking it all for the win. As the heart of it is 4-time world champion Jordan Halvorson, who's not just riding, she's basically leading a movement. She's here today to talk about the new docuseries, The Grit It Takes to Make It, and why this really isn't her first rodeo. Welcome to the show, Jordan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Rodeo has always fascinated me, and actually, I have my own belt buckle. I did ride a bull once. I fell off in the first few seconds, so this is basically a participation trophy for bull riding. So, hey, you're a 4-time world champion. Can you take us back to the beginning, like the days that you first started out? What made you get into the bull in the first place?
You know, like it honestly for me started by chance. I grew up riding hunter jumper horses, a little bit wild, a little bit smaller than some of the other riders. So I was actually riding naughty horses and ponies. And we had a buddy that said, "Hey, what do you think about riding a bull?" And I obviously said yes. And yeah, same thing. I fell off very fast the first time, but it was just more of a bucket list thing for me. And that's how I started. And I was hooked and kept going back week after week after that.
Yeah, I told the guy, how do I get a buckle? And he's like, well, you have to ride a bull. I was like, come on, man. I was trying to like catch a greased pig, go like lasso a sheep or something. Because I grew up in ranches and stuff with my family. So they stuck me on a bull. He's like, if you get on this bull in a rodeo, we'll give you a buckle. So they did this whole participation trophy thing. So I get it. I love it. This show really captures the risk and realities of the sport. What do you hope viewers take away from watching your story?
I hope they take away that, you know, you can do anything in life. You know, don't be afraid to follow your dreams, you know, push through any kind of boundaries there are and just live a life that you want to live.
And you also started your own all-women's bull riding league. What inspired that and how has that actually grown?
So they actually used to have women's rough stock riding events in rodeo, you know, a long time ago, early 2000s and prior to that. And so when I had learned about that several years after I started riding, you know, we had been kind of working towards bringing that back that they used to have for women to be able to compete against other women in the sport of bull riding.
And how do you go about mentally preparing doing bull riding each time? I was scared as hell, but how do you go about doing it because you know what's at stake?
You know, I just think about the challenge, think about what I've got to work through. And for me, all the preparation that goes in beforehand helps me mentally. If I feel physically ready, mentally ready, like it helps every time I go to get on.
And the show also highlights, it's not just a sport, but kind of like a sisterhood. What has the community of women in bull riding meant to you?
You know, we all have our different struggles and you can always learn something from another woman, whatever they're going through. And, you know, whether that be in our riding or in our everyday life, you know, we've just learned to, you know, help each other out and grow as we grow in this sport.
Jordan Halvorson, thanks for joining me this morning. You got to catch Not Her First Rodeo. It's a new 6-part docuseries from ABC News Studios, premiering on Freeform with 2 back-to-back episodes. Then you can binge the whole full series starting Friday, June 6th on Hulu. Thanks for joining me this morning, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
If you've ever been around a kid in the last few years, you probably know Bluey and her little sister, Bingo. The show's a total favorite for families packed with moments, both kids and adults. They love it. Now, Bluey's teaming up with a brand you already know to bring some fun into the kitchen. Let's take a look.
Kids love Bluey, Bingo, and their adventures. Now something new aims to bring Bluey to your own kitchen. New Bush's Bluey Baked Beans launched recently at an event at camp in New York. Mom, actress, and entrepreneur Ashley Tisdale was on hand and tells us more.
I'm so excited to be here for the launch of Bush's Bluey Baked Beans. We're humongous Bluey fans, and we're also huge fans of Bush's beans. So it was like a perfect partnership.
And 6 grams of protein per serving is good news for moms.
And they're so nutritious, and it goes with everything. And so for us, it's just like they have truly made, like Bush's Beans has made it a lot easier for me in the kitchen. We truly like are humongous fans, and half the time I'm like, what should we watch? Let's watch Bluey. Like I'm like, let's do it.
Find new Bush's Bluey Baked Beans in a store near you and recipes online at bushbeans.com.
You ever feel like no matter how hard you try, your paycheck just doesn't stretch far enough? You got groceries, gas, rent, it's all gone up, and most of us are looking for smart ways to save. So today, we got lifestyle expert Evette Rios here to share some practical, real-life tips to help us get that more bang for our buck, and why your wireless plan may be the key to unlocking even more savings. Welcome to the show, Evette. How are you?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And, you're right. We're all trying to get more bang for our buck. This is crazy. When I read this, I was like, oh my gosh. Inflation has increased 23% since 2020. So we're all noticing everything is way more expensive than it was even a few years ago. So, here are some kind of tips that I've used in my family that have been able to save us some money that I hope will help your viewers as well. So the first thing is, with the home utilities and the expenses of heating and cooling, I ended up switching to smart thermostats, which saved about 10% a year on our expenses, which is substantial. The other thing that I try to do is meal prep on the weekends. So it sounds like a real pain in the tail, but actually it's not too hard once you get the hang of it. And there you're going to be able to buy in bulk. You're going to reuse ingredients over the course of the week, and then you're going to have less food waste, and you're going to eat a little healthier, because the reality is restaurant food is not only expensive, but they don't really care how much butter and salt they put in their dishes, right? They want it to taste delicious. And then the next thing that I did was I really looked over the subscriptions that we had as a family. And, I try to do this every month and eliminate those that are maybe doubles or triples or we don't need anymore, because you'd be surprised how much you end up paying in these like hidden fees.
And one thing that caught my eye was that you said that people might be leaving money on the table when it comes to like wireless plans or credit cards. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that I think is really great about T-Mobile and Metro by T-Mobile is that they've really paid attention to the fact that we are paying so much in subscriptions. Now they have plans like Metro by T-Mobile, for instance, has plans that include Amazon Prime right in their plan, so you're not having to pay double there. And personally, I end up using Amazon Prime for the free shipping, and I love some of the programming, so that's a really great one. They're also offering MLS Season Pass, which gives you access to all the soccer games. My kids are big fans of soccer, so that is a huge perk. And then MLB TV for those that are really into baseball, that's also included. And then if maybe you're a little bit heavier of a cell phone user, you want a little bit more robust of a plan, you can go to T-Mobile. Their experience plans now have $200 in added value every single month. So for instance, the subscriptions they offer rolled into their plans are Netflix, Hulu, and Apple TV, which are, some of the very, very best, and those are included right in your plan, so you're not paying double. And then on top of that, you're getting the largest and fastest 5G network, and you're also getting access to T-Satellite, which is really kind of brand spanking new, but allows you to have connectivity anywhere you are in the country. So literally, like the summer road trips, when you're out in the road, you're not going to have those dead zones that you used to have because that connectivity is now national, which is pretty cool. And if you happen to travel a lot internationally, there's data coverage in 215 countries with T-Mobile. And you also get in-flight Wi-Fi, which is amazing when you realize the price of Wi-Fi on planes can be like $30 a flight.
Heck yeah. That's perfect. I love that. All right. If somebody wants to learn more or do their own research, where should they go?
For sure. You can check out all the plans at t-mobile.com, or you can go to metrobyt-mobile.com.
Evette Rios, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yay. Thank you. Have a good one.
Family caregiving is becoming a full-time job for millions of Americans, and most of them are doing it unpaid. A new report finds nearly half of the country is on the verge of a caregiving crisis. Dr. John McHugh led the study. Liz O'Donnell lived it. So let's talk about what's happening and what kind of support families need right now. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thank you.
All right, John, what's the state of unpaid family caregiving in the United States right now, and how does it differ from state to state?
Yeah, so this was research that was done at Columbia University and sponsored by oHCM. And we really wanted to make the invisible visible by highlighting the immense contribution that families provide to our healthcare system. And so we found that 24 states, nearly half, were either critical or at high risk of a caregiving emergency. And just as an example, in Florida, which was rated as critical, the valuation of unpaid family caregiving in Florida is $60.6 billion. And to put that into some context, the economic impact of Walt Disney World is $40 billion. So we really hope that this report will serve as a tool to assess the family caregiving landscape at the state level and help to inform decision-making and political advocacy.
Is this kind of caregiving really becoming more common, and if so, why?
It is on the rise, and there's several factors that are leading to that. First, you have a lot of pressure on the long-term care workforce right now, and that ends up placing more burden on families to take care of their loved ones. Second, we have an aging population, and many older adults with more comorbid conditions. And then third, we have a rising prevalence of dementia care. So dementia care is much more intense, time-consuming, and emotionally draining than many other types of care. And we found that nearly half of our valuation, $340 billion, was attributed to dementia alone. And if just 10% more caregivers cared for a loved one with dementia, the total valuation would increase by $62.3 billion.
All right, so what are some of the biggest challenges caregivers face because of workforce shortages, especially in rural areas?
Yeah, so in rural areas, this is particularly intense because you tend to have higher shortages of long-term care formal workforce, and you have a more rapidly aging population. In addition, often in rural areas, you don't have the same level of family support that is nearby and local. We actually found that more than $375 billion, which is nearly half of the total valuation, was distributed across the 32 states that have a greater percentage of their population living in rural areas.
And Liz, can you share a little bit about your personal story and how it led you to become an advocate?
Yeah, it started out slow. I now look back on that phase, I call it the caregiver creep, and I think it's a pretty common entry point for people. It's when our parents just start to need more and more support, and we step up to help them, but we don't realize we've taken on a whole new role, and we're not identifying yet as caregivers. We just think that we're being, good daughters and good sons. So that was a couple of years. And then there was the crisis, which I also think is a very common entry point for people. And in my family, that crisis was my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's the same day my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So now all of a sudden, I've got 2 parents to care for who are in crisis. I need a care plan for them. I need to go to work. I can't afford to take unpaid leave. And so I tracked everything I needed to do on an Excel spreadsheet. And at one point, it peaked at 196 items. And so I vowed at that point that when I got through this phase, I would do something. And that's why I founded Working Daughter, because I didn't want anyone else to feel as alone and as unprepared as I did. And because I think we really need to do more work to make care and career compatible, because there were so many times for me it wasn't, and there are still so many people that it's a struggle for.
And from your experience, what are the biggest struggles caregivers are dealing with pretty much day to day?
Yeah, I think it's this lack of infrastructure. You know, the infrastructure around caregiving, family caregiving right now is so flimsy that it's like a house of cards. And any one thing goes wrong in your plan, like a home health aide doesn't show up or isn't available, that's just the gust of wind that takes the whole thing down. And then it's this dementia, the rise in dementia care. You know, my dad had dementia, and it was next level care, and it literally knocked me to my knees on at least 2 occasions I remember, where I just fell down sobbing from the intensity of it and the sheer responsibility of it. So getting that dementia support is going to be the difference between states, you know, moving into that critical phase that we talked about.
So what kind of solutions do you think would actually make a difference?
I think the workforce can do a lot. I think sometimes there are actually programs in place already. I say to employers all the time, this doesn't have to be complex and it doesn't have to be costly. Oftentimes your benefits packages already offer, you know, employee assistance programs, caregiver support programs, access to backup care, flexible work. So communicating that and making sure that employees know it, because the caregiver's too overwhelmed to even know what to ask for. And then I'm a big fan of support groups in general, whether it's, you know, through HR and at work, or, you know, through a community like mine, Working Daughter, where we have an online group, and people can talk to other caregivers and learn from them and lean on them 24/7.
Where can people go find more resources and or get some more support?
Sure. For more information, you can visit OTSUKA, that's OTSUKA-US.com/caregiver.
Hey, I want to thank you too for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Ever feel like you're doing everything right for your heart, but still wondering if it's enough? Well, new research is revealing something that might surprise you. Inflammation, not just cholesterol, could be the key factor behind heart attacks and strokes. And there's a new treatment that might reduce that hidden risk. Joining us to break down the latest findings is Dr. McHugh Budoff, a nationally recognized cardiologist and lead investigator of the Ekstrom trial. Welcome to the show, Dr. Budoff.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we hear so much about cholesterol, but let's talk about inflammation. What role does that actually play in heart disease, and why is it so often overlooked?
Yeah, so, inflammation, we know if it gets into the joints, can cause joint pain and arthritis. If it gets into the arteries around the heart, it can cause heart attacks and strokes. The problem is that we can't feel it when it's in the heart, inflammation, so we need to test for it, and it requires a blood test. So it's often overlooked because it's not one of our routine tests that we're ordering when we send you to the lab to check your cholesterol or your kidney function or anything else.
Your Ekstrom trial looked at another treatment. So what did the results show, and why is that such a big deal?
Yeah, so we studied a drug that's been around for decades called colchicine. It's actually used for gout quite a bit. And so we used a very low dose colchicine, 0.5 milligrams. We took patients who had plaque in their arteries, and we took half of them and put them on colchicine, and half of them and put them on placebo or no therapy, and followed them for a year. And those patients taking colchicine had less plaque buildup in their arteries. So it literally slowed down the progression of heart disease over the course of a year. And that's going to be very helpful because it's another tool in our toolbox to help people avoid the number one cause of death in America for both men and women, which is coronary artery disease.
And for people already taking statins or blood pressure meds, how does that pill fit in? Is it something that builds on what they're already doing?
Absolutely. It's very complementary to other therapies. So if you're on a statin to lower your cholesterol, or if you're on a blood pressure medicine to keep your blood pressure under control, you would add this therapy if you have inflammation to keep your inflammation under control. So it would work kind of together with your other medicines to help keep you healthier and hopefully have a longer, healthier life.
So how is this approach targeting inflammation different from way doctors have traditionally treated heart disease?
Yeah, so, we focused a lot on cholesterol, which is very important. We focused a lot on blood pressure, which is very important. But we can also now focus on inflammation. So now we have a third tool in our toolbox to help us promote heart health.
And for people who want to learn more or talk to their doctor, where should they start?
Yeah, so there's a lot more information about my study that I did, as well as inflammation in the heart, and even this therapy called colchicine at cvdinflammation.com. So all one word, cvdinflammation.com. And they can get a lot of information there and hopefully share that with their doctor. And their doctor will be familiar with colchicine because they've been using it for decades. But this is a new use of low-dose colchicine for heart disease.
Dr. Budoff, thanks for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Have you ever dreamed of high-speed getaways, dusty back roads, and that 1970s crime world where danger is just a pit stop away? You know, Max's new series, Duster, might be your next obsession. From Emmy winner J.J. Abrams and showrunner LaToya Morgan, Duster stars Josh Holloway as a getaway driver trying to outrun his past, and Rachel Hilson, a trailblazing FBI agent who's got her sights on taking down the dangerous crime syndicate. And come on, man, we got them both here to talk all about it. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Josh, you play a getaway driver in the 1970s Southwest. What kind of drew you to this role, and what makes Duster different than some of the other crime dramas out there?
Wow, everything drew me to this role. First of all, it was JJ and LaToya Morgan, and I was like, that's incredible on its own. It's such a rich era to explore. The 70s, just with fashion and music and cars and everything. It was just a dream come true to get a phone call like this. I'm like, absolutely, I'm in 100%.
And Rachel, your character is an FBI agent in the 70s. What kind of preparation or mindset did it take to try to bring Nina to life?
Yeah, it did take some prep. I had the opportunity to speak to several former agents, a couple of which were Black women who joined in the early 80s. So getting their insights was invaluable. I read a bunch of books. I watched a bunch of movies, read all about Nixon and the Panthers just before and their their conflicts with the FBI and the Black community's conflicts with the FBI, and just sort of tried to get a well-rounded picture of where I was coming from and where I was in 1972. Yeah.
And there's a heck of a lot of grit and style in the show. What kind of world are viewers stepping into when they pretty much hit play on this?
Wow. It's kind of like a modern Western. It feels like it's like this. The desert is a character in itself. The car moves you between scenes, so it's got this high octane driven pace, and then it's so character driven. You never know what character you're going to run into, so it's just like that. It's like a Pulp Fiction, lock, stock, two smoking barrels type adventure.
Yeah. There was something that JJ said, I think a couple weeks ago that was like, it's sort of like what a show that was made in the 70s would look like if, it was just elevated a little more.
If it was done good.
If it was done well.
Josh, Rachel, thanks for joining me this morning. Duster is streaming now on Max with new episodes dropping every Thursday through July 3rd. So check it out at max.com or search Duster on your Max app to start watching. Josh, Rachel, thanks for joining me this morning, my friends.
Thank you, Dan.
And that's it for Rise and Unwind TV. If you actually want to be on the show, go to our website, riseunwindtv.com, fill out the form, send it on in, and maybe you could be on a future episode. Also, go to our YouTube channel. That's Rise Unwind TV. And until next week, that was Rise and Unwind.